Hello everyone, I have a quick tip for you today on data flow queues. So what's a data flow queue? A queue is in a data flow is exactly that. It's a point in your data flow where you don't want to allow records to move forward unless some other condition is met. And then on subsequent executions of your load process, you want to retry those queued records and just treat them as if they are unprocessed. So when the condition does get met, they go ahead and move forward in your data flow. So let's jump in. I'll describe a scenario, and we'll build this out pretty quick here. Okay, so I have a sample project. This is just a project that's using the AdventureWorks sample database as its source. A quick look at the data model. It's simply a fact table with 5 dimensions. A very simple star schema. So let's look at the fact components data flow. I'm going to focus in here on this particular transformation so we can narrow this down. So this is a very common design pattern. It's loading records in from the source system, staging them, consolidating in PSA. You have a sourcing component where we're selecting the unprocessed records out of PSA. Then we're verifying the grain with our fact grain component, and then loading those records into a fact component. And if that succeeds, we're going to come back and update those records in PSA, marking them as being processed. So we have a resilient data flow here, but what we want to do is we want to queue records in our scenario. We want to queue records such that they don't actually get loaded into the fact table unless some other condition is met. And let's just say that other condition is that the records are going to find a related customer dimension record. All right. So to set that up, the first thing we need to do is create our condition. I'm doing this in FS here, or fact source. So I'm going to come into my join definition, and the condition I'm looking for is I want to ensure that my records are going to find a related customer dimension record. So I'm setting up a join on a left outer, which is going to make sense in just a minute. Let's set this up on customer ID equals customer ID. And I'll call that Joe customer for join on expression customer. All right. So now I'm doing this on a left join because I want to leave the records that are in the queue in this FS. This FS actually creates a table and it actually writes out the records, instantiates them into this table. So what I'm going to have is I'm going to add a field to this FS that's going to tell me whether or not the record that's about to be processed into the fact table can find a related customer record. So I'm just going to call this dim customer. Since I did a left join, this field will be null if the join fails. Now the next thing I want to do is make sure those records don't move forward into my data flow. So I'm going to go downstream into my fact grain component and just create an expression that I can set as my filter that says I only want the records where dim customer is not null. All right, so I have that expression. Now what I can do is, since that's a Boolean expression or the Boolean resulting data type, I can set that as my where clause. And there you go. So now what I have in place is a situation where my FS is going to do a left join to my customer dimension, add a field to my output, and if that field is null, the record's not moving forward. So now what I need to do is make sure that those records also don't get marked as processed in PSA. And to do that, I need to go over to my fact update load status component and add the same condition here. This time it's going to be, once again, dim customer is not null. And I also need to create a logical AND because I want to make sure that I'm looking for records that have the same GUID. So customer is not null and the records have the same GUID. That's the only situation where I'm going to actually mark those records as processed. Go over to my join here, and I can update the join on expression to be JOE. So the records that are going to be included in the update will be the ones that have the same GUID as is in FS, and also the ones that were able to successfully find a customer record. Okay, so just like that, we got the queue set up. There's many variants of this. One thing you could do is you could create the join here in FS on an inner join if you wanted to. And what that would do is it wouldn't let any records move forward in your data flow if they don't meet your condition, which leaves them in a PSA as unprocessed. The problem with that is you have a little bit of ambiguity in determining which records are unprocessed simply because you haven't processed the records, and the ones that are unprocessed because they're in a queue. When you actually write these records out in FS, you know very clearly which records are the ones in queue. They're the ones that have, in this case, a field that's null. The dim customer field is null. So what's going to happen in this data flow is records are going to come in. We can load PSA as many times as we want, just like, this is one area we're trying to separate dependencies here between PSA and downstream. So we can keep loading PSA, accumulating unprocessed records. Then the unprocessed records will be sourced into my FS. That's when I'm going to add a field that determines whether or not I can find a related dimension record in my customer dimension. If that record is null, it's not going to move past the FG. If it is not null, it will move past the FG. If it is null, it will not move past FG. Same thing applies to my update, so those records get marked processed correctly. With those records in FS, once again, it's easy enough to put a report on top of that where I'm selecting all of the records that have a null value for my dim customer field. I can say these are my records that are in queue. Might want to flag those so that you can go and check out potentially some late arriving dimension records in the customer dimension or what have you. Okay, so there you have it. That's creating a queue using LeapFrogBI. It's pretty simple to do. Doesn't only apply to fact tables, but it's pretty common to use these when in fact data flows. So hope you got something out of this. If you have any questions, drop me a line. I'd be happy to help. Take care.